their computer infrastructure. Total of $700,000. With all of that said, I had asked Shannon to give you one last paper that has some numbers on it, so you could follow along. Because basically at current, we do not have a balanced budget. That's okay, that's all right. Yeah, okay. So at current, we don't have a balanced budget. Our expenditures far exceed our revenues. Using our cash projections at the end of this year, June 30th, 16, we anticipate that we'll have $5.3 million in cash. There were two items that weren't taken into consideration that we know will be approaching, and that's the $336,000 that we need to set aside for our self-insured health program, as well as the $450,000 for the IT infrastructure that was approved at our last board meeting. So if we deduct those two items from our cash that we anticipate having on 6/30, that will bring our cash balance to $4.5 million. Our total expenditures for fiscal year 2017 are at $25.9 million. Based on our Neola policy, we all agreed that we would keep a reserve balance of 5%. So the 5% of our 2017 expenditures is $1.3 million, bringing our new cash balance to $3.3. As the budget stands right now, we're short $2.1 million. And we would have $1.1 million remaining, which is approximately $170,000 less than our Neola 5% requirement. So taking that into consideration, we'll begin the presentations. But first, I would like to have Mr. Stevenson come back up so he can discuss his expectations.
As mentioned, I think there's a great experience by having everybody go through their budgets and then kind of doing it instead of isolation. We're actually seeing across our whole system, so that instead of operating like 4 individual units, we actually now see what the costs are. Keep in mind that what's being brought to you now does include a 5% and 6% raise. Again, we threw in everything. There is room for negotiation. Clearly, that's an area. Positions are room for negotiation. It's more or less looking for your feedback and input into how we proceed. As we go through and have these presentations, it's already nerve-wracking enough for people to have to get up and present, and I don't want this to ever feel like they're defending their budget. That's not what it's about. So my hope and expectation is that the principals will be able to present and questions would be minimal or none at this point. And if you have questions, it's okay. But the idea is let them make their presentation, let them kind of give you this is what they want for positions, the 10% over, whatever it might be. Then at the very end of all the presentations, if you take notes throughout or take your questions on the side, then we come back and then we get some guidance and direction, okay? So that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions. You clearly can do whatever you want to do, but the intent is let them present. Again, there's a lot to this because it's new, and so I don't want it to, my big goal here is for them to not feel like they're defending a budget. It's more like they're presenting where they are, and then we have some input, and then we have the month to kind of figure out where we go to present something back. The other thing is there are folks watching from home, and I got a couple of texts that when we do ask questions, to make sure you use the microphones. They said they couldn't hear, so just make sure that when you're going through to make sure to use the microphones. And if there's any questions throughout the process, I'll be right here to hop up and help, okay? Any questions?
Yeah. Two things. One, I guess a workshop atmosphere to me is hard to have when we've got this big dais. It's sort of like us and them. I don't consider this a workshop atmosphere, so I'm not sure where we're going to move, but maybe that would have been better. I don't know. Just a point of suggestion for next time we do this, so we can have more open dialogue and it doesn't feel like they're on the firing line presenting something, because I don't know how we get around that feeling, when they're standing in front of us like this.
Right.
It would be, and then two, when do we get your input
Right.
as board members on what the principals are presenting?
Absolutely. Well, the intent is that they'll present, and then at the very end, that's where the discussion will ensue and where we are and what we are. Now, at this point, I have allowed, as I said, whatever positions, whatever raise, the highest end of the raise is still on there. So then at the very end, we can talk, and that's why, from my perspective, it's the positions and the salaries. Those are the two things. So at the very end of this.
I got a question.
Yes.
If we're at a shortfall, how is that made up?
The only driver we've got, it's salaries. So it's whether a raise or not, it's whether we look at the capital expenditures, because what we've done is put some money away. I mean, another option is what's traditionally happened in this system is instead of taking money to put aside to pay for things down the road, I mean, clearly some of the shortfall, we could simply take the $500,000 Krista expansion off the table. We could take the $50,000 per school, then that's $700,000 right off the bat before we do anything else. We could also talk about expanding, but then at the same time, how do you do both, without money put aside? So that's where I'm looking for the input from you all, is what's the driver? We've got our strategic plan, which has highlighted that Krista McAuliffe is a priority. That was done with a whole group of 50 people without my input, it was, part of my input, but everybody else's input. So the question becomes, how do we do that? And that's where I think this workshop format is important, so that we can see across all 4 schools where we are, especially in light of the fact that we held, because we're full. We literally can't house many more students. So because we've cut off our revenue source, what is it that we are going to impact? And so we want new positions. We want to support the principals and the idea of getting new positions. We don't have new revenue. We want to support the staff for the raises, but we don't have new revenue. We want to put money aside for both professional development, computer technology, infrastructure, ability, and growth, but where that comes from. So I don't have an answer for you yet, and that's the intent of this, is to kind of get a sense from everybody where we are. I don't imagine that their presentations are more than 5 or 10 minutes in terms of their highlights. That's the idea, but if they take more, that's okay, so if they'd like to. All right? Did I address, is that?
Yes, I was just thinking, it sounds like we only have 2 revenue programs where we get basically per student. Are there other, and obviously expenses, there's fixed expenses, there's options, and there's growth. If our fixed per student rates don't change, are there other revenue options, other than cutting?
Well, and down the road, I'll give Steve Hook and Chris Fennell, and I can't let it all out of the bag yet, but they've done some really good job with business partnerships. And so I think that's where, if we're missing the boat, and that was asked in Neola, I said the same thing when we talk about our business partnerships, our ability to have, and I said that in one of the Neola workshops, having a grant writer or something along those lines, looking at those, we're missing the boat on all those things. So yeah, those are supplements that we should be investigating and doing. For right now, our options are, again, salaries, expansion, this is a big one, $200,000 for technologies, professional development, whatever we call it, and then the new positions. And that's where our drive is. Right now, we just can't add students wholesale.
So as we go forward in this budget workshop, we're going to look at the resources we know based on the numbers that we're given,
Yes.
and try to make that work within those numbers, and then between now and the actual budget time, look to see if there's other resources, and then prioritize those things that we want to put in the budget that we can't do
Absolutely.
based on this.
A great
Is that
example
the
is-
approach that we're looking at?
Absolutely, and like the internship positions that were mentioned before, would it be great to have another internship person or another guidance counselor? So, absolutely. We all, just as we talked about the technology, would it be nice to have? Absolutely. I mean, I would not stand here and tell you that we don't need those positions. So then the question becomes, where do we draw the line, and how do we want to do it? And I just want feedback, because remember, this would be easier to sit somewhere in an office, say nope, 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 give you feedback, and there you go. But the idea is here now that the principals are here saying, this is why I need the position, this is what's important, and then my feedback comes at the end in terms of, this is kind of my philosophy. But again, it's an inclusive process, and that's different than what it has been, and so that it's different for everybody, and so.
If I may, just for the newer members, if they're aware or not aware, even though we have the PICO, the capital outlay funds, and the FEFP funds, we don't get all of our PICO funds. That goes from the state to Lee County School Board, and they have the option to share those. So I don't know how aware, but
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with that. Matter of fact, I talked to Steve Tabor, who's the chairman at Lee County. I know him, and discussed some of these issues and obviously in an informal way, he doesn't make all the decisions, but I would say that it looks more positive that we might be able to work some situations instead of just going through the state and that the whole big process, which is going on with all the charter schools in the state, maybe be able to work it out more locally between our board and theirs. So, yeah, that would be a big enhancement. I was trying to get an idea earlier what kind of numbers that we were looking in that, and I think that we're looking, did we say between like 700,000 and 1.2 million, something like that?
There's a big range there, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see what that is, and then, I guess I'm not sure what the process would be as a board, that we would put together a proposal for them, for Lee County. I don't know if there's any informal work on that, or what we need to do formally to go and request those funds and see if we can work that out. And then if we could do that early enough, we could incorporate the additional revenue into what we need to do, what we decide to do.
Okay. I'm not sure how we do it as a board. Well, we can do it as a board, but I think if you have connections with the, with their board, pursuing that further to find out how much resistance there is, because I think what some of us have found so far, the resistance is more than they'll let on.
Right.
And then,
Do we have some documentation or something that we could put together to show? Because like I said, there's a range, and I'm not really
Absolutely.
sure how that range is, but if we could get a plausible
Absolutely.
approach to that, where we could have it, where we could say, hey, look, this is what we'd like to have.
well, have you seen the letter from their response, Lee County's response to,
Right, I can provide a copy of that letter.
I don't think I have.
okay,
no.
if you could, that'd be great, and that'll give you an idea of where they stood
No, when did that take place?
Well before me, it was a couple of years.
a couple of
probably,
years
I guess.
ago.
Okay.
But it,
So a lot's changed over there in a couple of years, and I think some of the resistance, I know some of the resistance that they've had before is the differentiation between public and private. They're very resistant to private, but because we're a public entity, I think they're going to be much, based on what I've heard so far, much more open to revisit that subject at an individual, at our level.
Mr. Bostrer?
I just want to apprise the board members that, yes, under present state law, school districts can share their capital outlay revenues with charter schools. All charter schools, whether run by a private they're all run by a not-for-profit corporation, although the backers behind them may actually be a for-profit corporation. We're a municipal charter school, one of the few in the state. There are some school districts, for example, Sarasota, just up the road from us, they share their capital outlay funds with their charter schools. As a matter of fact, all their charter schools are essentially, they're the public charter schools. They're all run by private organizations. One of probably the difficulties is I believe it would be permissible for this Lee School District to just give the municipal charter schools, and maybe you can make that distinction, funds, but generally where they share, I think the other school districts share with all charter schools, and that may be one of the great difficulties, because I think even in Lee County, there's a lot of charter schools. It's not just us. So that could be a difficulty.
It seems like their resistance has been that for the private charter schools versus the public. Are you aware of any legal reason or any that would preclude them to work with us in the public format? In other words, does it have to be all or nothing that you're aware of?
I'm not aware that it usually has been, but I'm not aware that it has to be.
Okay.
I mean, they couldn't make a distinction
And-
between a municipal charter school, which we're actually run by we have another government entity as a backup. Many of the private charter schools, although they're all non-for-profit, what has happened is the for-profit institutions have purchased real estate and lease it to the
Right.
to the not-for-profit entity, and so if the not-for-profit entity received those funds, it would go back to the for-profit charter school entity, and they would make a profit. Of course, that's not the case here in the city, so there are some distinctions, but no, I'm not aware offhand of legally any reasons why the school district could not work just with the municipal charter schools and not the other private charter schools that are non-municipal.
Now, me being a little new in the sandbox and the communications area and somewhat attempting to do things the proper way, is there a proper channel for us to communicate with them, or is it okay for me to talk to the board on that?
Well, bear in mind, when you speak to another school board, I mean, there's no sunshine law because you're different boards. However, you don't speak on behalf of this board, you're speaking on behalf of an individual, you know, for Mr. Winstead. That is whom you're speaking for, you're not speaking for the board. Now, if this board gave you authority to speak for the board, there'd be a sunshine problem. But if you could speak individually, but remember, you're only one member, you have no authority, you know, you're
Right,
not
so
representing
with that in mind, how do we, I mean, if I'm gonna go talk to, I have to have the board say, okay,
No,
we
no, you
want you to
don't.
go talk to them?
No, you
And then
know,
do that,
you
or?
talk to them individually without that, but remember, you're individual.
Well,
you're
I
not-
understand that, I know, but when it comes down to the next step where we really are trying to work something out,
Then it would have to be a board consensus, and usually the board would reach a consensus.
so I can do the research and talk to them
You can-
about
we can do the
proposals, we
research,
come
yes,
up with
and
the
bring it back to
ideas,
the
and then
board,
we'd
yeah.
come up with a formal proposal
And you can submit it
that.
to the board, yeah, to the school district, yes.
Okay.
After it's approved by this board.
Right, okay, good, thank you.
Jessica?
Yes, I just want to clarify, when we're talking about public versus private, I believe all charter schools are public. I think what you're trying to say is nonprofit versus for-profit, correct?
Well, there's, like you said, they're nonprofit per se.
Like, we're nonprofit.
Yeah, and we're a nonprofit, but we're a public nonprofit, they're a private nonprofit, so I'm splitting the difference between
No,
private.
we're a
and
municipal
public.
charter school, technically,
Yeah,
we're
we're
municipal.
Right, there are no private charter schools.
Yeah,
I'm getting nods from principals. Okay,
Right,
okay, I just want to make that clarification.
they're backed by a private.
right, like Charter School USA or something. Right, like Charter School
Charter
USA or
Schools
something
USA,
along
it's
those
a
lines.
for-profit, public charter school.
Right,
So I just want to make that.
I think the
municipal
distinction for us is a municipal, and I
Yes,
think that's the
municipal.
key. The key word is
Yeah.
municipal because we're backed municipally. We're one of the few in the state, and that's what makes us different.
right,
So,
okay, thank you.
Okay, let's continue.
okay, very good. Thank you all very much. So the first person, I have my sheet there, Jackie Collins.
Okay. Jackie Collins, Krista McCullough. Do you have this document in front of you? This is the one that I'm going to be referring to? Okay. Okay, the first page talks about enrollment. My enrollment forecast is going to be the same as it is this year at 744 students plus 40 VPK students. So really it's about 784. Now, I do have a little flexibility in some grade levels, to the chagrin of my teachers, that if I had to increase enrollment, I could. It takes about 10 students, an increase of 10 students to support the salary of one teacher. So that is something that can be considered here, although I would prefer to keep the numbers as they are. Right now, we're about 20 in kindergarten, 20 in first, 20 in second. I think we're 22 in third and 25 in fourth and fifth. So we really are pushing our limits as it is. But the plan is to keep it and not to drop below 784. Okay? The next page talks about our budget summary. The personnel cost, of course, has gone up about 8%, but that does include the raise that Mr. Stevenson was talking about and the additional personnel that I would like to add. My operating costs have gone down slightly, and capital outlay costs have gone up, and that's due to a couple different things that we need to budget for as far as food services and technology needs that really can't be avoided. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So if you look in the box down below, my revenues are 5.6 million, my expenditures are 6.4 million, and my reserve requirements would be $807,000. Now just let me remind you that that is the $500,000 we're putting aside for the expansion and the $50,000 we're putting aside for the technology plan that needs to be met in 2019. And the raise is included in there as well. So the numbers look devastating, but don't go by that. Let me explain further. let's see, the next page is my summary of VPK. I think it does say that it's increased 11%, but Marion and I were looking at those numbers. We're not quite sure that's accurate because nothing has changed in VPK from this year to the next. So we're going to revisit those numbers because they're not correct. So my budget highlights that I'm going to talk about are basically, there are two things I need to talk about. Position changes and software increase. And then I'll let Danielle and Todd Baldwin talk to you about the other capital things that we need. So the position changes, what I'd like to do is add 2 additional floating teachers. I'm working with Vicki and Mr. Stevenson on changing the titles of those floating teachers because the positions already exist to coaches. So I would be adding 2 reading coaches to my staff. And the reason I'm doing this is because what we're finding, and we've been, we've researched, we've got a 10-year period of time that we've researched how our students progress from K through 5. And what we have found consistently is that if we do not catch these students while they're in kindergarten and first grade, teaching them how to read, decoding, comprehension, if we don't get them at those grade levels and make them strong, we constantly have issues with students functioning below expectations throughout. So what we've experienced is because we don't have enough staff to manage the needs of these students in my population, we're finding that the upper grades have substantial need for extra assistance. Hence, we have a reading coach already. We're calling them an interventionist at this point. And we have 2 math interventionists. The numbers are large. Sometimes we're talking about almost a whole classroom. So my focus is if we can start at the bottom, at the very young age, and focus on remediation and intervention at this point, I can prevent the further need to have the coaches at the upper end because I would have caught the problem already. So like I said, I'm working on the change in the job description. They're technically teachers, they have to be certified teachers, but they need to have more specific background in teaching children at an early age how to read. So that's really the reason for the job change description because they don't exist at this point. The other position change has to do with our science lab. Right now, we have a special, it's a 45-minute period every 6 days that we have right now it's a substitute teacher, but we had always traditionally a TA teach. And it has to do a lot with the hands-on scientific experiments, the STEM part of what we're trying to accomplish. It happens in that classroom because it is a designated 45 minutes where they have time to experiment. And that is a critical component. And I think our science grades are fairly good considering what they are in the district. And I think that has a big thing to do with it. So I would like to change that position from TA to certified teacher so that they can, they're going to be teaching all 6th grade levels so that they can make connections between learning about earth science in kindergarten and then progressing from kindergarten all the way to 5th grade. Asking a teacher assistant to do all that planning, all that research, all that curriculum design doesn't really make a lot of sense. So they're doing a teacher's job at a TA's pay, and I think it would be better suited to have a certified teacher teaching that position, in that position, because we're tested in 5th grade in science. And you can't just teach them, hammer them hard in science in 5th grade in order to do well on that test. You have to start at the very bottom in kindergarten. So those are the 3 changes that I am asking for. The budget item that is changing has to do with software. We're using IXL, which is a math program for students. It's a fun math program. We're hoping that it will increase their math scores because it's fun practice. But I also wanted to add something called Mastery Connects, which is a program for all teachers that will help them tie their lessons and their plans specifically to the standards that need to be taught. And it will help them create, if they wish to create assessments, which they should be, it'll help them choose from the bank of standardized questions that meet those particular standards. And there is, it's hard to explain, but there is a way to grade it so that you can hold up your Scantron sheet in front of a camera and it will automatically grade it within a swipe. So it would be a great benefit for these teachers. It would really help them kind of start focusing on standards-based teaching, which is what Lee County is going to, because instead of them spending all the time pulling from different sources to meet the standards, because textbooks, of course, don't cover everything, this would be a great asset to them. That is about $5,000 more than what I've asked for last year. And that's really it. I mean, the rest of the budget is pretty skin tight as far as my technology requests. I mean, I have to allot certain funds for things if the projectors break down, if the smart boards break down. I use a lot of the Rally money to support technology because, you know, it helps get by from day to day. But those figures, you know, they're pretty steadfast. I need to have them in place. And then the rest is pretty much left to Mary Ann, Danielle, and Todd. It's kind of out of my control. So my and one more thing. Another increase that is over 10% has to do with textbooks. Because we're finding this need in K and 1, to better prepare our students to learn how to read, we would like to purchase a textbook series that is just for K1 and 2. And it is a very logical development that includes phonics, reading, comprehension, handwriting. Now, currently, we're using all different programs, and we're trying to combine them and make them fit together. But this program has everything included. So that it's expensive, but a lot of the private schools use it, and they have had significant results. That is to the tune of about $20,000. So I'm going to start in kindergarten. We're going to buy it. I would like to buy it for kindergarten this year. Next year, I'd like to buy it for first grade, so we'd have kindergarten and first grade. And then the third year, we'd add second grade. So we would do it over the course of 3 years, try to keep our costs a little bit lower. So my textbook, what I'm asking for in 2017 is about $46,000. We have to renew our math bundles for students and our science bundles. So there is additional cost that we pay every year to renew those textbooks. So it is about a $20,000 increase. Anybody have any questions?
I'd just like to clarify, make sure I understand. We would like to add 2 reading coaches, which would be
Correct.
certified teachers. And we're changing a TA to a certified teacher.
Right,
Those are the 3 positions.
right.
Okay. All right. Do you know, what is an equivalent elementary school and a public school? What would their budget look like? Any idea? Do we know that?
I really don't have any idea. I do know that they do have a lot better than what
Well,
we
I'd like
have.
to see what that difference is.
They have special classes, behavioral specialists. They have the flexibility to have a lot of extra staffing on hand that we typically don't necessarily have.
Right, because
So-
we're restricted. But what I'd like to see is
Restricted.
sort of what, I mean, we, again, I believe we do a lot with a lot less.
We do.
But I'd like to see, you know, what an equivalent school, if we can find that out
Public,
somehow.
yeah, we could find it.
I have a couple questions. Is now the time to ask, or did you want us to save our questions for the end? Because I can,
We can do now to get the
Yeah, go ahead.
general and then the bigger stuff. You know, I guess what most important here is what I'm looking for is that, again, the principals don't feel like they're being held to the thing. So the questions that are generic in nature and overall, if it's the big system stuff, then
Okay.
you don't need to hold up. So does that make sense?
yeah,
So, and you decide whatever that is.
I'm going to ask her these 2
Go for
questions.
it.
Number 1 is the 2 full-time coaches. Could those be paraprofessionals, because that would be a lower cost, or were you saying
I
certification?
do have one coach that's existing who's an interventionist, and she is a TA. But she has special certifications in Barton Reading and Spelling, which is a dyslexic program that's Orton Gillingham based. It's very specific, and she's taken the coursework and the tests. So she's able to teach those children that need it Barton, and that's what she does. I don't feel that a TA would have the knowledge and the capability to teach a child in the early stages of reading. You have to be familiar with a variety of different programs and different interventions and be able to screen and assess where they're weak. I don't think they would be qualified for that. If I did, that would be the way I would go. But it just doesn't work in these 2 positions.
So certification is important.
It is important.
And then my other question is about VPK. It looks like, well, I know you said the number might be off, right? But it still looks like it's being subsidized, is that correct?
Mhm.
Like the income doesn't pay for the But that, I think that's probably the case at most.
Now, that could be
schools.
the increase in the raises for the personnel, because there's a teacher, certified teacher, and a teacher assistant that's required in that classroom. It's the healthcare, if they take healthcare, so that could be what it is.
Okay,
But there's no change to VPK this year.
okay. That's it for now, thank you.
I've got a question along the same lines. On the two coaches, teaching coaches, are you going to have a requirement that they have a specialization in reading? Because I think that.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
I
why
mean,
I'm changing the job
Right, because
description.
I really think if we just take another teacher, not that they're
No.
not all great, but those needs are very specialized, so I
That's
wanted
correct.
to see if that was part of your
That is correct, yep.
philosophy there.
It's got to be specialized.
Okay, good.
And what I do find is that I have two now. It is very effective. We have, if we have, 60 children in the MTSS program, which is the intervention program, about half of those children, instead of going on to ESE, they go back into the regular ed classroom because we've addressed the specific needs of these children and we've helped them through it. So that's huge to prevent. It's a prevention measure, of course, to keep students out of the ESE program.
And being able to catch it at that level is
critical.
excellent, because there's other psychological elements that they perceive about themselves and that are self-fulfilling. Sometimes they don't address those issues early. It could be mechanical or catching something at a little briefer age, and then if they're able to get on track with that, it affects all their studies and across the board, and then also from then on with
Across the
their perception.
board.
So.
And maybe it could prevent me having to continue to have the reading coaches in the upper grades. If I can catch them early, maybe there won't be any need. That's the goal. So,
I would hope that we would spend the extra money to have certified positions in all our schools, and that we're not putting staff that are really not certified to be doing the job that they're doing, whether it's teaching assistant or whether it's whatever. So I don't know where it stands now, but that's part of our strategic plan, is to have qualified staff.
Correct.
So better to spend the money for somebody who is certified, qualified, has experience. It will be the benefit to our students.
I have a question, bear with me. For the Master Connects, is it a subscription or base software, or is it a standalone
it's a
purchase?
subscription
Okay,
every year.
okay.
It's a nicety.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I have one more, no? Okay, yeah.
Good morning, Steve Hook, Oasis Elementary. I'll just follow suit with Jackie. With the enrollment forecast, Oasis has been, over the last, since we did the addition, at 888, with 848 regular K-5 and 40 VPK students. We run consistently at that number over time. So that is that. Budget summary. The personnel is pretty much in line. I mean, the adjustments there are simply, I'm asking for one new position that I'll discuss in a little bit here too. And then the salary increases across the board are reflective there. Operating cost, a minor increase, percent change. My building is the oldest. It was the first open, and so the maintenance costs and those things are going to start coming to light, and so setting aside money over time here for those is going to be key. And then the capital outlay, there's some significant stuff in there that we've asked for some storage and some other things that we also are willing to negotiate on the other side. So that 275% or 91% change reflects about 3 different things that aren't that big. Part of what I want to do today is not only discuss my changes and needs, is just the overall philosophical thinking to some degree of me, when we do this, when Jackie, when the principals sit down with Mr. Stevenson or Marianne, our primary goal is always student need. What most impacts, where am I going to get the greatest bang for my buck for students? And so I always look at those things and try to look at the classrooms, look at the materials and things that we have inside of that. When we sit down with Marianne, I just brought this 2014 sheet that she talked about, but on any given sheet on this page, there are 42 line items. 9 of those I actually get an input in effect because most of them are kind of locked in. That's the reality of the struggle sometimes is there are so many things that in our system with limited funding sources that are locked in. And so the education of all of you is that, when we add new spots, when we add transportation, when we add administration, when we add food service, those things get divided by 4. And so the impact creates a new spot and might very well be a needed spot, but it also impacts all 4 schools when you do that. And so, to filter those things through the budget, we haven't been very careful about that in the past because we've always had growth to support exactly what's going on. We've known that on any given year, we had a lot of growth coming our way. Well, we're at a point of no return now as far as growth is. I mean, we might be able to get 5 or 6 here or there, but the majority of us are at capacity. And so anything we do from here on, either A, we have to find a new funding source for, and I mean, part of the reason we started the rally was the fact that there has to be other streams of revenue. I mean, everybody's going to make a little on that, but it's not where we need to be in the bigger picture. To Mr. Stevenson and Marianne's point, we have to find a grant writer or something down the road because we have to have other ways to generate revenue. But just the impact that every time we add something, I mean, in the latest, when you okay the rent, that rent gets divided by 4 because that's where that money comes from. It's FEFP and capital outlay. So inside the budget process, every time we vote on something, I mean, I ask you to just simply filter it a little bit to the fact that what's the impact, where's the greatest impact for kids? Inside of that, the position changes. We have long, all of us, been making chicken salad out of chicken crap, to coin an old phrase. But Jackie and I both, our specials, have been manned by paraprofessionals simply to cut cost. I mean, I need to have 7 places for students to go because I have 7 classrooms and they have to have 7 different places to go for specials. But majority, I double up a PE class and have a para in there for 1. I have an art teacher who is a paraprofessional and does everything a teacher does, and I have a technology teacher who's a paraprofessional who does everything a teacher does because that's the expectation, and they do it well. So the position change is for me, just like Jackie, is to keep what I have right now and to add 1 teacher, to make that technology teacher a certified teacher, or the art teacher a certified teacher. I'm going to try to phase this in over 2 years because I do get the bigger picture of money, but to make those 2 positions certified people, just because of the logistics, the liability, and all the work that they are doing to have. Elaine Beatty does an outstanding job as an art teacher, but I mean, she gets paid as a paraprofessional, and she would probably go get her teaching degree if it was going to be that way. So that position changes. That building needs are fairly evident. I mean, the capital is, we're at a point, paint, roof. We've worked on the air conditioning and made that better, but that just bought some time probably. We've had debates on whether epoxy on the downstairs versus carpeting, so you're not replacing the same thing. So there's lots of discussions we need to have over time about where we can look at and savings, not just in the short term because it's cheaper to do carpet, but in the long term that If you do an epoxy or some other kind of flooring, you don't have to replace it every so many years. So, with regards to capital request, you told me what one's a shed for storage. In any school, anywhere you go, anywhere in the land, there's not enough storage, no matter how many storage units you have built inside of your new construction. That's probably the same with the house. But that's one of the things. Fencing was another, and then just some other general things. So the operating lines over 10% are mostly pretty much in line. Textbooks is always going to be a large item. Technology is always going to be a large item. I mean, we try to help with that as much as we can. Ms. Moniz always recognizes the PTOs. They gave $30,000 towards the technology ends this year based on our Yankee Candle sales. So, I mean, it's not as if people aren't trying to do their part. Is just in the greater thing is that can't always be where we come, because there's going to be years where Yankee Candle doesn't make that kind of money or those kind of things. So, but I think my other 10% things are fairly in line, and I'm open to questions.
I just had a question. In regards to maintenance, not just in your school, but we can make it specifically to that. The fact that we are getting older and we're having to, I think it's good forethought to do some planning. Do we have any assessment process in place? How are we looking at the physical side of the operations and saying, okay, these are the things we're going to need to replace coming up, and then to get an idea of what kind of budgeting we need in that?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the maintenance team and the city have done walkthroughs, both in the area of maintenance and custodial and in the area of technology towards those means. I mean, to the credit here is the fact that we have started to realize that there has to be a longer term outlook than just yesterday. And so Mr. Stevenson has had the maintenance, and Marion have had the maintenance team, and the city do some walkthroughs on general things, and they've created a list inside the strategic plan, even I think, strategic plan, so that we have those things listed, and they are, for the first time, being at least looked at and addressed.
So not only items, but we're getting some projections on the revenue related to those items?
Yes, I mean, they have some generalized costs that Paul and we have an excellent maintenance group, and they are on things, but yeah, they are constantly seeking pricing and looking at different avenues that way.
Okay.
And
Yeah, Paul, yeah, our maintenance team, I mean, it's a great group, and they do a lot of it on their own. And then we also had assistance from the city. We just changed over to LED lighting, and we think significant costs will be found there. But there was the contacts that they had helped save money even on the installation and kind of thing. So
and to
that
perhaps for
team's
Mr.
invaluable.
Winstead's benefit, the buildings are not owned by the Charter School Authority. The buildings are actually owned by the city, and I think Mr. Zivkovic can testify to that there is some ongoing discussions between the city and the charter school as to the proper role of each entity in maintaining the buildings.
Okay, so the city actually has a primary responsibility for the
Not
building
necessarily.
maintenance?
Not necessarily. That's a whole different
Necessarily.
discussion. And I mean, we've had that discussion, but at a later time
Sorry
you
for the
might want to have that. But today is probably not a good time because it'll fill the rest of the day.
Yeah, we could take the whole meeting to talk about
Oh,
it.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr.
Good morning once again, Keith Graham Middle School. I prefer extremely generic questions when it comes to that point. But, again, on that same spiel with the middle school, enrollment forecast is the same. It's been pretty consistent the past couple of years. We anywhere between 840, 850. every year, and we are full. I've got 25 desks and 26 kids in some rooms. So that tells you where we're at with enrollment. So that's pretty consistent. As far as the summary goes, personnel is probably if you want to call it a big change, is going to be the change for the middle school. And with that, just looking to add a technology teacher that we discussed a little bit ago in the meeting. In order to, one of the goals has always been to extend that STEM curriculum throughout the school and to have teachers start using STEM lessons and creating a project-based learning theories and ideas into those curriculums. So in order to do that, it's the engineering piece that's the most important, along with the technology, but that we already have. So I might have said that wrong. We're looking to hire an engineering teacher. Sorry. That's the additional spot. My mistake. It's the engineering piece. And that's the biggest part of STEM that most folks are looking for, obviously. So that's going to be the biggest addition to the personnel. The other thing is not an addition, but it is just an offsetting position. I would request and look for, and again, it's not an addition, so it would just be a dean of students at the middle school. That position, again, would be offsetting with another position that is no longer going to be needed for next year because of some scheduling switches and some things that we need to do in order to fit other positions like the engineering and the additional tech and whatnot. So, and that's on the schedule side of things that we're still looking through and going through. Currently, and I just want to again, just to the educational side of things here, as far as the dean and reasons for that, I'll give you just typical numbers real quick. Typically in schools, there's one administrator for every 300 kids. Our enrollment is 842. We have 2 admin. So we're hurting in regards to that, in my opinion. We have 845, sorry. And comparatively speaking, middle schools in the county, they typically have the principals, they have 2 assistant principals, behavior specialists, at least 2 guidance counselors, multiple specialists, and numerous paraprofessionals at that non-instructional, outside of the classroom folks. Gulf Middle has 693 kids. Diplomat has 731. Trafalgar has 776. Calusa has 780. And Mariner has 822. Again, we have 845 with 2 administrators just outside the rooms. So a dean of students would be a necessity for myself. Katie O'Reilly, who is our guidance counselor, who is fantastic. And she has to be fantastic, and I'll give you a little bit of idea of what she's doing for us and where a dean would really help us out, and us being myself and Miss Collins, who's the assistant principal at the school. Katie O'Reilly does a guidance, which is academic advisory for kids in regards to classes and direction and whatnot. But in addition, she's also the master teacher as far as student scheduling goes and teacher schedules. She does the peer conflict resolution and relationships, anti-bullying discussion, awareness and campaigns, equity coordinator, testing coordinator, MTSS coordinator, 504 coordinator, social work duties relating to family and student community resources and referrals. She also does daily cafeteria duty, 10 hours a week, every day. So again, when one of us is out, there's only 2 there. So myself and Mrs. Collins, who's the assistant, we can't do things together ever because somebody's got to be at the school. So we're hurting, and that would be a big request. And again, it's not going to be an addition to anything. It's just a simple offsetting position that relates to the dean. So that's one thing that I hope we look forward to do. But again, the personnel, just to remind everybody, it's the engineering spot. That's pretty much the big position changes. Building needs, not much different than Mr. Hooks, and is just general things. I think there's some carpet, some painting. I do believe there's a steam table that I think was the biggest item that we were looking to do for the middle school and capital. Operating lines reflecting a change of 10% or more from the current fiscal year. I think there were just 2 big ones, and those were, again, textbooks, like Mr. Hook said, as well as technology. It is my hope and dream at someday to put a Chromebook in every student's lap very soon. Just to give you an idea, the numbers to do that right now and today would be between $275,000 and $280,000, which we don't have. So again, that would be the rollout for everybody and teachers. So part of that request that I have down in textbooks and technology would begin at least to start that process by putting it maybe in the hands of by grade level and started integrating that into the schools. That's the two biggest changes in regards to the 10%. That's about it as far as the middle school goes with those categories.
Can you talk more about the Chromebooks? Can you
Sure.
give us more details, like how many?
Yeah, the Dell Chromebooks that we looked at, and Ms. Teresa and I kind of discussed, would be the same things that the high school is currently implementing. They're just the Dell Chromebooks. What's the specific? They're $300 a pop, and that includes the initial
Software and everything.
software and whatnot. Yeah.
Software, and it's all managed, it's cloud-based, so you're not having to pay for RAM and all memory and all of those types of things, because everything is really cloud-based at this point, and with the Google Apps for Education, which I'm thankfully glad that somebody saw the need to do that some time ago, and we are a Google Apps for Education system, and so we have a lot of access to a lot of really cool tools that don't cost us anything as a result of being able to go this route, so it does get some savings back in regard to technology.
When
We're at 900. I mean, with teachers and students, you're looking at 270,000, and that's, of course, you're talking middle school kids going to need some protection on the outside of those. So that's an additional cost.
Did you say that you're phasing them in starting
I'd
this
like
year?
to.
So
That
how
depends
many
on
did
the
you have
budget. That
built
depends
in?
on the textbooks and where I put in with the technology. I think it was 60,000 apiece in each of those categories, which is the 10% more than what we've done in the past.
Okay.
So eventually, like she said, in the long run, you're looking to save money because you won't have, it'll just be subscriptions for online textbooks.
So then-
The two mobile labs and the two static labs that we currently have, you won't need them. So that will open up 2 classrooms at the middle school where I can put in 50 more kids down the road. But right now, I said those static labs are taking up 50 spots where kids are just rotating in and out of those rooms to use the technology that we currently have got. So by starting to implement the Chromebooks and getting one-on-one down the road, you're looking to save a little bit of money too. So.
Where would we be looking at purchasing? What approach have we looked at getting pricing on these things?
Ms. Treese could probably have a little more information than I do right now. She's piggybacking off the district sale, I do believe.
Okay.
270 something, it's about the cheapest Chromebook you can buy, and they're actually much sturdier than what I was anticipating for that amount of money. They've come a long way in 2 years.
Also in line with the strategy of implementation, especially as it regards to curriculum. So you're saying we got, because I've seen the county kind of made a mistake, they got the Chromebooks first. It's like they're dressed up, but they have no place to go. It seems like they're not being leveraged and utilized very well at all at this point. We have a pretty good plan in place for implementation. We know how we're going to be able to use those.
There will
Other
be,
than
yeah.
what's the-
We're
what
so
the-
early right now. Yeah. Like I said, I get them into teachers' hands, and part of the line budget there that was there, our teacher computers now are needing replaced, and they need replaced for next year. So that was one of the other items that we had in there, was to replace those out. So if it's a go, we could go ahead and replace those with the Chromebooks and get them started, and give them a whole year experience with
To
them.
answer Mr. Winstead's question, though, we do not have the infrastructure in place now that if
Correct.
everybody went online, they would work as intended. We don't have that. So what we did in the last meeting, we started the RFP process on getting that, and we have the $450,000 set aside for that, so to build our internet infrastructure, so that basically a Chromebook is, to me, a glorified web browser, because it is all web-based. It's going to go online, but we don't have the ability right now. If we gave every student a device,
It would crash.
it wouldn't be
So
useful.
we really got 2 challenges. Then we have the infrastructure to support it, which is the web
Which
application,
is in
the
progress.
Wi-Fi type stuff. And then the second one is, I know we're doing what we're doing right now within the technology labs, where they have to rotate through. But there's also a different approach. Like if we're going to start substituting textbooks, utilizing the Chromebooks, that also has to look, which ones can we bring over in a soft copy or cloud-based program, and how do we really integrate those? And one other last piece, that we need to look at is making sure, and we've had this discussions a little bit, but making sure that the teachers are comfortable and know how to employ that technology themselves. So those would be the only things I have.
Yeah, it's a lot of research and a lot of talking to publishers and what they have to offer, what consumables that the kids can have as far as physical things in their hands, along with the online textbooks and the interactivity there. So it's a lot of research and talking to those folks and getting it online. And then a lot of them also provide the professional development that the teachers need to start integrating curriculums. And the other thing, the other piece that we added, requesting $8,500 for Schoology. Schoology is a learning platform. We started to implement it a little bit throughout the electives. There is a free version, and that's what we're kind of using now, as well as the high school. But next year, we're looking to go all the way with it and adopt their premier version, which is a $10 per kid fee. So it'll be about $8,500 for the middle school to have. It is basically a one-stop shop for everything. Right now, we're currently using Edmodo. Sort of looks like a Facebook page in regards to setup. It's just a place where teachers can upload lessons or upload quick links or communicate real quick with messages to kids and parents. Schoology will do the same, but will also have many, many, many other attributes to it. You can go, again, there's lesson planning. They will import Focus into Schoology, so you can have Focus as far as that goes. Teachers will have grade books. Teachers can do tests. They can be graded instantaneously, get results to kids and parents that moment, the second they're done, and then all that good stuff. So it does work, and there's a lot of good things in there, as well as communication, as well as anybody who is using Schoology from across the world has access to everybody else's stuff. So it's a shared web-based format that everybody can use and sort of switch off. So as far as areas that are outside of Florida, as far as ideas and curriculums, whatnot, they can adopt and use and start picking and pulling from that too. So that's, again, there's a good piece to Schoology too, which is an electronic profile for kids to document their mastery of standards all the way from 6th grade, wherever they started, hopefully 6th grade, all the way through 12th. So at the end of 12th grade, they'll be able to pretty much take their portfolios electronically and say, here's what I've got, here's what I've done, here's what I've accomplished, and here's where my mastery is on all of the standards that I was going through in the state of Florida. So that's a big piece to Schoology as well. That's probably the most beneficial for kids. But again, it's a lot friendlier than Edmodo currently is too, so looking to do that.
Athletics coaches and officials, I see that on here. I know that you've had those already, so it looks like it's a new item. I'm just curious.
Yeah, that would be, the middle school is going back with the county to their sports programs, and so we've been working with them. Mr. Montag, who's been working with them, might have more information.
That vote's coming in this week, so we don't know our fate just yet. We are a limited participant right now in the sports of golf, cross country, track and field, and tennis. That relationship's been working out pretty well this year, which has actually strengthened the argument to have us back as a full participant next year. I'm waiting on the word from Mr. Matt Hagan with Lexington Middle School. He's going to be at that meeting with the principals. I'm waiting, I mean, it could be any day now, I hope.
So to understand that we're going to be integrating with the county schools in the sports program?
Which we originated in back in 2006 when we first opened our doors. We were that way for a few years. We kind of broke away to do our own thing because we weren't happy with how Lee County kept restricting us with practices, contests, and whatnot. Not everyone makes it to the playoffs, so on and so forth, stuff like that. And we had an opportunity to enroll with the FHSAA and work with other FHSAA middle schools. Tri-County area, Charlotte, Lee, and Collier. We've had some discussions over the last few, months, or even the last couple of years, about making that move back, and that's where we're at today.
So what would this 5,000 go to? It would be, in that case, it would be like a contribution, or this would go away if,
I missed that part of where, I missed that part.
am I misreading this?
For the officials, the officials,
Oh,
is
yeah,
that right,
that's right.
Jessica? The official costs and things like that?
Athletics coaches and officials. I'm only asking because there was nothing in the past 3 years, and now there is. That's the only reason why.
It was, unfortunately, we've always had money for officials, but a lot of the athletic coaches received an ad pay.
Okay.
And what had happened was, a lot of So what we've done is we've taken all of those coaching and official positions and moved them down the budget to an operating line.
That makes sense. Thank you.
We had them just being paid somewhere else.
Right, exactly. That's why I was confused, because I knew that we had it.
Good question.
Okay, thank you.
If, to follow up on the Chromebooks, and I know we're doing our technology stuff. I guess I want to make sure we get the right stuff. I understand we need technology, but I want to make sure we get the right stuff. And I'd much rather see, rather than, I know we want it in our budget now so we can build to get everybody there. And I personally would rather set aside funds than just buy something because we had some money now. You know, so I don't know if Chromebook is the right solution. I don't know, because we haven't had the other technology stuff yet. And if it is, that's great. But if we're doing it just because I want money in the budget, I want to get it, I'd rather set that aside to get the right thing for our students in the
Yeah,
future.
we've researched a little bit. Testing is a big part of that. If you can do testing on the Chromebooks, which I believe you can, that's going to help out. It does, yeah. It'll help out testing tremendously. Right now we have 150 computers,
Right.
and we're trying to get 3,360 test sessions done inside of 7 days or inside of 8 days.
Okay.
I mean, it's insane trying to get
And like I
testing
said, I
done
understand
with
we
what
have-
we've got. So yeah, I mean, a part of that research is going to be whether or not state standardized
One of the
testing can
things
be
I think
done.
would be awesome, I think for us to give input, and probably for you in the decision process, is to see the investment and that return on investment. Because on one way, we're looking from a budget standpoint, we're looking at it in two complete different ways. So if you can show, okay, yes, this is the cost to implement and to purchase these, it would be great to see how much it's going to save.
Right.
If it's going to offset the cost, that's great. And I like the question that Rob said on, I know the county has went with Chromebooks. I know Chromebooks has been like what people have been doing, but are we deciding on Chromebooks just because of that, or because we can tag on to the county purchasing, or have we really looked at the technology both from a technological aspect, and is it the best technology? And number two, is there someone like, and I'm not sure this would fit in with all the things that we want to do, but like with Apple or some other company that might donate or support that somehow? Are we basically, have we looked at other options, or can we look at some options to just kind of make sure if that is the way we're going to go, what is it going to save us by doing it now and for the future? And is this the right specific technology to employ from the
absolutely.
standpoint of the equipment?
The other, and being that they're essentially web browsers, you're talking about Chromebooks for teachers as well? Because I know when we looked at Kristen McCall, we were buying additional memory for their existing computers. And like Ms. Treese just said a few minutes ago, the Chromebooks, they're not memory heavy. So are they going to be able to run their systems on those Chromebooks?
And save appropriate, have hard drives on there, things, whatever they need to
Are
have
they just going to
on there.
work? Right, I mean, is it going to
Yeah.
work? Because we're talking about, you've got Schoology you want to have, Ms. Collins has another program, and then we're talking about a third program that we're possibly running. So
All web-based, all
If they're all
cloud.
cloud-based, it
Are
won't
they?
matter,
Yes.
but
They
if
are.
you
That's,
gotta
and it
hold
looks to
stuff.
be the trend that things are quickly
understand.
going to, which is a lot more web-based type things. I mean, that's Schoology, that's Focus, that's everything's going to be attainable at home. It's just where it's going.
And I think this is why in this budget process, I wanted you all to see, because what's been happening, and it's a good thing, but when we talk about what we're doing system-wide, that's where I want you all to see, because we do have a lot of great ideas and a lot of great people doing what they need to do, but we really need to look at, from the system perspective at the bottom line, and I know Shannon and Keith have done a good job of getting us to say, hey, this might be the platform to use, and this may be the best one. So now we need to get that as a system-wide enrollment if this is the one we want to go to. So I wanted you to hear these, that's why it's so important. I like the questions you're asking, because that's exactly what we were hoping to experience for you all. So, thanks. Sorry.
Quick run.
I'm in big trouble then.
She's got extra handouts.
Of course she does.
This will just
One
hopefully
packet.
a little bit easier for you all because we do have the athletics portion in here as well. So what I've handed you is just because my mind probably works a little differently, which is maybe why it is more complicated. Maybe I should be more simple and then things would be easier for me. But what I have done is printed for you my working documents, basically. So I am a Google fanatic. And so my Google Docs are always ongoing. And even this little sheet has changed since I've been sitting in here. So your pencil that you had earlier, I'm going to ask you to jot some extra things down that I failed to actually capture in this as I was cutting and pasting for you all. The second sheet that you're going to see is this sheet. It's just a stapled sheet of numbers. And I can tell you what I did, and this is how I was trying to make it more simple for you, is I literally took the budget that you have in front of you, and only the things that are 10% or higher show up here. So this is really where I need you to look, because that will just allow you to kind of focus in on the areas that I've increased spending. And I want to speak to you on behalf of the students and the staff and the administration on why those needs have risen. Anything that is blank there is personnel, and so that's just part of what I'm asking for. So you'll see some different ad pays, some different stipends. I didn't, for transparency purposes, I put everything in there that was over 10%, but it isn't something that I'm going to address individually. So all of those that have comments, that comment relates to what it is that we're trying to accomplish at the high school. So hopefully that will make some sense to you. I wanted to begin just by looking at our enrollment forecast. So if you look at our enrollment forecast, it is projected for 765. So 765 students. Right now, you can see that is an increase from this year. We're currently at about 750. That has been our goal for this year. The additional students that this is projecting really is a result of the freed up potential office space that we would have with the board office. So just to clarify, in order to kind of cover the funds for a teacher, for an additional teacher potentially for that space, that's where that number comes from. And so that's what we were kind of working with. So some of this can change. I know it looks like that's going to happen. Did I
And I
mess
just wanted to
something
mention,
up?
no, not at all, you're doing perfect.
Okay.
And that's why earlier when we talked about the rent, and Steve brought that up, that's why it's important for you all to know that was brought in the intent of raising revenue, not costing the system. So when we look at trying to cut cost everywhere we can, need to make clear that that's supposed to be a revenue driver, at least in terms of renting somewhere else will not cost more, it will actually gain revenue, which is hence the new position, new student FTE. So
students.
just want you to understand.
What was it?
Is what we're looking at?
Yes. The, one of the things I wanted to make mention, you had mentioned a specific number for kind of what it costs to educate students. So in the state of Florida, the average number is about 10,000. We currently spend about $6,000, and you'll notice I am way over budget, so I have a lot of paring down to do because my budget ended up, if you average it out, about $8,000 a student. I was just doing some quick math over there, but that kind of gives us an idea of where we stand. As in the state of Florida, and 10,000 is, I would venture to say, a national number. I won't say that for certain, but that's about what I dealt with prior to coming to Florida, was about $10,000 per student. So $6,000. It's been a challenge, and I think that's the challenge that we're going to continue to run into is when you look at the education experience that you want each individual child to receive, it does look different, it should look different, but it also requires a much different toolkit. In order to deliver a project-based learning classroom, there's a lot of training that has to go along with that. And so it isn't necessarily a tangible piece of property that you're giving to a teacher. It's not a book on how to learn how to do PBL. It's training. It's sending people on a plane or in a car somewhere to actually be trained, because it's a very intense, labor-intensive learning process to learn how to truly deliver project-based learning as it should be. Same with technology. Technology is, it's something that it's at our fingertips, and we're very familiar with the devices that we use and the programs that we use. But when you talk about integrating technology into a school for learning, because the value add is hopefully the access to learning 24/7, that's hard to capture. It's really hard to determine what that's going to look like, but that also takes teacher training. I can't just hand a device to a teacher and say, integrate technology. you know, as a teacher, I could figure that out, but there are teachers that really don't know what to do and they're uncomfortable with that process. So what I would say is currently I don't even feel like I have enough budgeted for professional development around technology and really those instructional practices that are going to get us to where I believe we need to shift into. And so you're going to see sort of an attempt to start that process. This is, I mean, I feel like I've dreamed to some degree because it's so expensive, but even at that, I've really buffered really what I'm asking for sort of in the first step of the process. Because you do have to have the PD and the training and the infrastructure really to get to where we're going in place before you can jump too far ahead. And so you'll notice, I'm going to just go through that highlight page really quickly for you all, if that's okay, just to give some insight. Oh, did I mess up?
That's not projected, that's the 10 for the band, the 10 for that equipment, that 10, 10, and 10 that you requested.
Oh, got it. Okay. All right, so in terms of positions, what we have asked for in the budget is in our office staff, we actually added an office staff individual this year, but the role was a different title and funded differently. And so what we would like to do is really, those two positions are the exact same position. So part of it was to really make it fair. And we need two people in our office. I'm not quite sure how one person did it, but with the amount of students that we service and the need that's constantly in and out, we have a lot of drivers with older students, and they're constantly moving with on-the-job training, internships, just parent pickup, students leaving. We need those two folks to be on the same page. The guidance position is currently existing in the building. But what we did last year was shift a teaching position into that role because we really had a need. When you have 750 students, we only had one real guidance position there, and so the need was there. And so we basically kind of plugged a hole to get through this year. And so we took one of our teacher positions and plugged there so that we would be able to service students. And while we are servicing students, there's probably even room for more, but we feel like we at least have to have those two positions budgeted for. And then in terms of teachers, you'll notice there I have a STEAM teacher listed. I also have a dual enrollment math and a dual enrollment science. So that that really adds to our current need, doesn't really get to where we want to be. I would love to add a business teacher at some point. I think that's a critical piece of this work, but right now our other needs are really more of a priority, and that's where this is really where our students are needing the support. So that's what those two dual enrollment, just for clarity, is a critical piece to some of the budget as well. I'm going to ask you to add that as a new budget item because I failed to put dual enrollment on here. But we have some students this year who have expressed the interest in pursuing dual enrollment opportunities with FSW specifically, which is wonderful. We want our students to be earning as many potential college credits as they can while they're in our care so that we can support them as well. And what has happened, we have actually lost some students to dual enrollment because they could actually transfer to the district and they had access to dual enrollment opportunities. And we actually did have students that were leaving us in order to have those opportunities because we had put a cap on it because of budget, I think, in the past and the way that it was set up. But what we're looking at is really how can we offer that? Because even though it is a cost to us, it's not a benefit for them to leave us because we are actually losing money in that opportunity. So by adding math and science dual enrollment teachers in our building, students can get those courses inside of our building without having to go to FSW. So it saves time and money. And it really provides access to all students because there is an equity issue. There are students that maybe want dual enrollment opportunities, but if they don't have a vehicle to get them there or someone that can deliver, then it really is a bit of an equity issue for us. And so we really have been looking at how can we make it equitable and accessible for all students. And this is a way that we can offer some real opportunities for all students within the building, provide them the support that they really need at this juncture. They're not college kids yet. I know in my building we have a tendency to say, well, they're taking college courses, and so we want to treat them like college students. They're still high school students, and we're preparing them for that juncture, but they're not necessarily prepared to be treated like college students. And so this gives us the opportunity to really support them within our building. And it's a savings. It's much cheaper for us to employ and put them in our building than it is to pay the dual enrollment fees at FSW. That being said, we do have some students that are really on the track and they need full-time dual enrollment. And they will leave us if they don't get it. It's an advantage for us because we still get their seat time funding, and they can go get FSW credits that service them. The beauty in that is when that happens, I can refill their seat. So kind of imagine I'm a student in a classroom. I'm now going to go dual enrollment full time, and that is going to come at a cost. But I get the student money attached anyway that I was getting, and now I can put another student in that position. And so that is an opportunity at the high school level to really bring in, not a lot of revenue, but it has the potential to bring in some extra funding to provide opportunities for those that need it, but then also service students within our building. So we actually, the budget, if you'll look at the budget, we've actually budgeted for 20 students to be in the dual enrollment program. And I think that I don't know that we would fill all 20 of those seats, but we felt like that was a good start. We know at least probably 10 or 12 solid students, and I have a feeling that once they find out that we're doing this, we will retain some students who have told us they were going to maybe transfer if we can provide them the opportunity. So we're going to start with 20. That's kind of what Ms. Sanford and I, as we discussed with the guidance counselors, and then with Ms. Moniz, we felt like maybe that was a doable number. But it does come at a cost. It's, $36,000. So that's where that budget, when you see the 555% increase, that's what that is a reflection of. Moving down through we'll just kind of go through this chart. The dual enrollment is at the very top of the chart. ACE costs. So as a result of increasing students in ACE, you're going to increase the cost of ACE because you have to buy the materials, lab materials, textbooks, and the actual assessment that they utilize to get their scores in to actually earn the credit for the course. The next line, which is small equipment, I put in projectors, but I was incorrect. That is actually $30,000 that I had asked for in terms of the new classrooms that we were establishing. So the STEM room, we're asking for a minimum of about $10,000 to get that off the ground, and that's not a lot of money when you start talking power tools and robotics. That $10,000, it adds up really quickly. But again, we were thinking sort of how can we just get it off the ground. The second $10,000 in that amount was for marching band. Our marching band is really getting off the ground, and they're ready to go by fall. And of course, there are costs associated with marching band, with instruments. I've learned a little bit about that. I got kicked out of band in middle school, so I didn't really have the opportunity to really learn about band, but I've really been informed by the students and the teacher lately about what is required for marching band, and some of those instruments are different and they're costly. A walking or marching band tuba is quite expensive, actually. So he is doing some fundraising and trying to figure out how to make that happen, but that was the other $10,000. Then the third $10,000 had to do with the lab upgrade. So depending on what route we went, right now we have graphic design. And so when I talk about technology, I will talk about that classroom different than the one-to-one program. So the one-to-one devices they're exactly what Mr. Zivkovic said. It's access to the web, access to information. It's a venue for students to produce content. Teachers can post content, but students should be kind of creating content. That's their tool for learning. So when you're trying to really capture what does the device do, it really is access to curriculum 24/7. I don't know that you'll ever get a savings off of technology because there's always going to be recurring costs. I came from a one-to-one school. We were one-to-one K-12 with MacBook Pros, the Apple MacBook. So I do feel like I'm at least versed in what it takes to implement, what that process needs to look like, what the training should look like for teachers and for students. and the difference between using a one-to-one device as a student tool on a daily basis as opposed to a graphics art room, which really requires a much different type of software. And MacBooks are what you need. The Macs are what you really need to run that classroom. And we know that we have some upgrades that we have to do. In fact, we had the conversation yesterday that we have to dial back our software to make the computers run quicker, which means that the students are working in software that really isn't even functional. And so when we talk about real world, I guess it is real world for us, but it really isn't a fair, equitable world for our students when they're working on antiquated programs or programs that are now out of date. So that money is specifically, when I talk computers in the graphics room, it's because of the graphics and the things that they're doing with Yearbook, with photo editing, with marketing, and she's also going to be integrating some business courses through that program as well. So that's a different sort of venue for technology. I just want to make sure that they don't get lumped into kind of the other one-to-one devices. The next line item is the computer equipment. And it is what I've asked for this year is to go 2-to-1. In a perfect world, I would love to go 1-to-1 because I think that is the way to go. When you have the caliber students that we're serving, it's critical for them to have access to information and to be able to consume information anytime they are ready. We have very motivated students, and honestly, they really want information consistently. It really isn't a battle to motivate these students. Yes, sir.
The technology. And I know that the situation will not be across the board, but I noticed that a lot of students already have computers.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have cloud-based systems, is there a way to possibly look at integrating, at least in as we migrate to a more fully compatible one-to-one type of situation? Or is there a way we could look at integrating home type, their own laptops that they have, and utilize that? If it's cloud-based and they just sign in and do it, what's the difference? Now, I know at some point where, no kids had computers, that would be impossible. I know a lot of them have, not all of them, but is there a way that we could look at that, or has that been looked at all?
We have, and we currently allow students to bring their own device. So I think it's a yes, we've done it. But the and part of that is you're going to deal with them being able to maybe access things on our time that they shouldn't be. So you can't really manage their device because it's owned by them.
No, you can't manage their devices, but there are restrictions when they go into when we do the upgrades for the internet. They can do restrictions of where they can go and not go on the internet. So that is a possibility.
We can, but that's only.
And we will when we use the.
And we do when they come in, and they are on our Wi-Fi, but in
Right.
some cases they use their own phone, and so they can access things that maybe aren't appropriate for school on their own device because it is their own device. And so we don't really have protocols in place to address if a student is looking at something inappropriate and another student sees it and it's a distraction to class. What are those parameters look like when it's their own personal device?
True, I can see that, but we would still have right now we would have the same issue whether
We do.
they used their own devices for good or for evil.
Right. No, you're right. Technology it's both ways.
Yeah, it cuts
I think
both
it
ways.
has advantages and disadvantages to both. The management.
I'm not really looking to say that that's the way that we would want to do, but I'm also looking at the challenges. I know we want to move maybe faster than the finances can support that, and looking at from some alternative approaches for those that may have appropriate technology that they could utilize. It could, and just brainstorm, maybe this isn't the place for that, but I guess a budget workshop it might be. But, other things too, where we could make things available, like if parents, wanted to support like their kids to have,
would be
we have these many in the classroom, but if you want to get these for the use, they could contribute, I don't know, something like that over and
Yes,
above.
no, if they want to bring their own device, I am a huge supporter of bring your own device. So we've opened that up, but we still have a lot of students who don't have access.
I know that whole approach is challenging in certain ways. It would have to be looked at, but just thought I'd bring it out as maybe a possibility.
Yes, and that's what we're currently operating under. So if they have a
Okay,
device,
good.
then they use their own. We do have some that we check out. If students are working on a project, it's kind of a as you need it, grab it and go sort of system. We don't currently have enough. And we're in the same boat in terms of the labs. The updating of the labs are pretty old. Personally, before I ever buy a desktop computer, I'm going to buy a laptop because then I can gain 2 classrooms back and students can take those devices and work anywhere they want. And it does free up space for us, and in turn that opens other doors. I mean, then they can build robots and build things, and the creation of content, I think, is extremely important for our students. So. So that's the premise for the 2-to-1 was to ask for the funds to get to 2-to-1 status this year, with the goal of being 1-to-1 by next year. And that could happen in a lot of different ways. It may be people sponsoring computers, it may be parents buying students their own computers, whatever that looks like. But I would love to be 1-to-1 by next school year. And what that does is it truly does give us some opportunity to free up rooms. The testing is a huge ordeal for us. We lose a lot of instructional time because of mandated testing, and it is what it is. We can't change that. But if every student has a device that we can test on, then we can test whole groups at a time in the gym and knock those out, as opposed to having to do those for multiple sessions over multiple days. So that would be money back in terms of instructional time, which is really what we're looking for. We need every instructional minute that we can get our hands on. It would be hard, I think, to capture savings. I know you'd mentioned the savings, but even with online textbooks, there is a cost. And many times it's the same price as a hard copy textbook right now. I think that will change soon because obviously just the economic drive there. But for right now, there's still a lot of cost attached to that. We are really encouraging our teachers to not be so textbook driven. And so I would love within a few years to be able to report that many of the instructional activities that you see occurring in the classroom are driven by real world functions and not so much a textbook. That's the goal, but it's going to take some training and time to get there as well. The next line item is exactly what I had mentioned, the online subscriptions and textbooks. The next one, lab supplies, ACE training, and professional development. You'll notice that one wasn't over 10%, but that's a new budgeted item. So there aren't numbers, but if there were, I'm sure it would have exceeded. But again, it goes back to training and access to be able to train teachers in what it is that we're expecting. Teaching is much, much different than even when I entered the field. And in order to get folks to the place that they need to be able to use the tools and design curriculum that's meaningful, they truly do need training.
Is there a way, and I'm sure you're looking at this, on prioritizing what type of training they need from a few basic computer, introduction to computers 101, all the way on through more advanced applications of technology within,
Yes, sir.
The programs. If we could identify those and prioritize those, if there's a group of them, maybe we could save some money. Instead of sending them each one at a time out to California or wherever to teach, maybe we get an instructor come in and do classes, for the teachers in a group, identify what the need levels are, and have them actually go to the classes that we could set up, maybe in the evening or something like that at the school.
So we are working, I shared this with them last board meeting, but we have worked with the EdTech folks at Google, and we have a trainer coming on May the 14th, which is a Saturday, and we're hosting a Google boot camp. It's a teacher boot camp, so teachers can get their level 1 certification. But of course, there's a cost. It's $200 and whatever per person, but we're hosting it with the hopes that we can fill the seats and end up with 3 seats free. Right. And so I'm hoping it fills and that we can build and that all of us can start training folks in technology. If you can train them, a lot of times they can help train each other if you can get your core. But I would love if we can get the Google boot camp filled, it's May the 14th, that one, then I think just word of mouth will fill at least maybe a couple more, and then we'll be able to offer the level 2 boot camp certification. So I'm going to try to get trained. I'm going to try to become a trainer so that I can train and lead. But I'm not sure my tech skills are that advanced.
You know,
We'll
we
see.
might even be able to get, I know this, I'm thinking out of the box again, and I don't know if that's always applicable, but even some from the colleges, they could do, some of the students there who are, many of them, especially in the technology areas, are way advanced than we would have currently available at the teacher level here, because that's what they're doing. And maybe as interns or something, as a project, we could get the universities to donate, or themselves, the students would come as their own projects to help teach the teachers on that. So that might be another way we can do that. They're up to speed on that, and
Yeah.
they can get credit, academic credit for it. And
Absolutely.
it costs us dollars.
We're leading a lot of our own PD, so I will say, I mean, I with my background, I've had access to a lot of technology training, and so I've at least got a year's worth of content probably for them before I start struggling. So we're
Good.
okay for a little bit, and I think the Google boot camp training will help me as well, just to kind of see what is new.
Sure.
Because even this year, I have really not attended any trainings. I feel like I'm almost in a little bit of a deficit of keeping up because I'm not able to really get the training because of funds. So, but that's really what we're looking at, is try to build capacity within us to provide that development for teachers. The other big professional development that I'm an advocate for is the project-based learning training. And it is expensive, and it does require you to travel to get there. So that's something that, we're trying to really work out now, even getting teachers trained this summer potentially. And piggybacking off of some folks that have grants to do that, and trying to get our teachers in as well. So, but if you all don't have any questions, I'm going to jump to the next box. All right, the next box we've already talked about is that guidance position. You'll see the next few down through there, if they're over 10%, it really is related to professional development. Again, I feel like I've not really budgeted where I should on professional development, but that's where we are right now. If you'll flip to the next page, I made an error and put report cards and diplomas in there for printing. You can strike that because that is not accurate. That's under food service, so I got my line items crisscrossed, so I apologize. There are a lot of numbers in Florida with the budget, and so I'm really trying to learn those, and it's taking me some time, so I apologize for a few of these little mistakes. And then you'll notice the last one in technology is also for PD, and I specifically put to the Florida Tech Conference, and that's specifically for Mr. Cole to be able to get training as well and stay up to speed with what's happening around the state of Florida and around the country. So that covers pretty much everything instructionally in regard to the increase in budget.